What's going on, guys? Corey from PhoneArena here, and today I have with me the Moto E4. Now, Motorola has been making the E series for going on 4 years now, and along the way they've slowly garnered a reputation for low cost and high value, much like the G series whose success inspired it. Each year they've returned to show decent performance mixed with a low cost, but often miss key features like front-facing cameras and flash. Last year, Motorola renounced their typical Snapdragon processors in favor of a slower, mid-range offering from MediaTek. This year we see the return of Qualcomm's processors, as well as my favorite addition, the fingerprint scanner. Perhaps its best feature, though, is price. $129.99 gets you an unlocked version of the E4, while Verizon sells its prepaid device at the ultra-competitive price of $69.99. Sounds like Motorola has all the right parts this year, but does that mean that it can't make some missteps along the way? Let's find out in my review of the Motorola E4.
2017 has been a year of maturation for the E4, as it's now officially split into a two-phone offering. Here, we have the 5-inch regular E4, but Motorola also offers a 5.5-inch Plus variant with essentially the same specs. For our take on the E4 Plus, make sure to check out our full review, but suffice it to say, little separates the two. Up front, you'll find a 5-megapixel selfie camera with its own LED flash, and in back, an 8-megapixel lens, also with a single LED flash. Last, but certainly not least, below the display lies a fingerprint sensor built into the bezel. This does not click, but is rather part of the phone's face, adding a nice bit of technological class to the overall aesthetic. While the Plus has a slightly classier brushed metal back, Motorola has opted for a micro-textured plastic backing on the regular E4. Regardless, the phone still feels solid in the hand, and while not abundantly sexy, the thick curves give us the impression that it could withstand a decent drop, unlike the all-glass, bezel-less designs adopted by an increasing number of flagships. The Moto E4 houses a 5-inch HD display with a resolution of 1280 by 720, and while it does display bright, vivid, and generally accurate colors, a relatively low 294 pixels per inch means that finer details can get lost. You won't want to use this if your work depends heavily on viewing images on the go, but for all other use cases, this display will serve quite well. Years ago, Motorola dispensed with their Android skin Moto Blur, a move which seems to have served the company well over time, as they've tried and succeeded in making any slight tweaks to the OS lightweight and unobtrusive. The E4 is no exception. Running near-stock Android 7 1.1 out of the box, the only marked differences are the icon pack for a handful of icons and the addition of an app simply called Moto. This app allows you to enable gestures on the fingerprint sensor and turn on the E4's nighttime mode. While we initially jumped at the opportunity to enable gestures, we unfortunately found them to be too inaccurate to leave enabled. Swiping left on the sensor triggers a back function, swiping right triggers multitasking, a tap on the sensor brings you home, and a long press either locks the device or calls up the Google Assistant. Too often, though, did we find our swipes registering as home taps, which can get frustrating. Some simple software tweaking would go a long way here. It's quite clear that this issue isn't hardware related, as we saw nothing but quick and accurate performance from the sensor when unlocking the phone. Only a quick tap is necessary to begin the unlock sequence, taking less time to scan than the phone does to unlock, an impressive indicator of the biometric hardware. Speaking of hardware, we're happy to report some decent specs for a budget phone. 16GB storage and 2GB of RAM paired with the Snapdragon 425, which has found a well-matched home in the E4, rarely producing stutters even in our heaviest multitasking sessions. 720p video, navigation, app downloads, and web browsing all ran concurrently and smoothly. No app ever froze or forced close during our testing, but only encountered occasional hiccups when dual screening larger apps. Graphics-intensive games will lose some frames, so don't expect the most fluid experience there, but they are completely playable and still fun. Much like other budget-friendly phones, the camera may be its weakest area. Though most images captured on this 8-megapixel sensor will look okay on a phone screen, any bit of zooming will betray the camera's inability to reproduce finer details and color gradients. Color accuracy can be erratic and overexposed, but this wasn't always the case. Mostly we took shots with seemingly negligible differences, but some scenes produced colors so far off that it made us scratch our heads. To sum up the camera in one word, we would say, unpredictable. Don't get us wrong, this may be one of the better sensors we've seen in a $70 or $100 phone, and it will do just fine for most, but an improvement here would make this phone an almost irresistible offer. We do like the camera's professional mode, however, which offers sliders to control ISO, shutter speed, aperture, white balance, and manual focus. Video recording only offers one mode, 1080p, 30 frames per second, and as you might expect, it suffers similar ills as the camera, adding noise and shutter roll to the equation. Calls on the E4 came through clearly and without issue, although the speakerphone is quieter than we find useful for most practical applications. Battery life was similarly pleasing, lasting easily through a full day of moderate use and showing no issue with getting well into a second day on lighter usage. Charge time, on the other hand, was slow, clocking in at 2 hours on the dot.
Motorola mostly nails the entry-level smartphone with the Moto E4. Quick performance, a vivid display, and a snappy fingerprint sensor highlight our favorite features of the device. Overall, the drawbacks, namely the noise-prone and inconsistent camera, do little to detract from the overall value of the phone. Selling for as little as $70, you'll certainly be hard-pressed to find a device that offers more or performs better at the same price. Thanks for watching. I'm Corey Gaskin with PhoneArena, and be sure to subscribe for our latest reviews.